Hello everyone. The first thing I want to say is a very big thank you to Juliet Brodie for inviting me to speak at this wonderful conference. I'm really sorry that I can't be there, but what I want to do is, even though I can't join you in person, is just to share with you the wonders of the seaweed world. You're in such a beautiful place. And I've worked a lot in Scotland, and it really is one of my most favourite places to go to study the seaweeds. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the seaweeds and try to impart in you the wonder that I have for them. And first of all, I just thought we'd have a little quiz. And again, it's a shame I'm not there with you because I would be asking you questions. So you're going to have to do this yourselves, but have a look at these pictures and see if there is anywhere there that you recognize. And also think about what you're looking at and what this might tell us. So just a few seconds for you to think about whether you recognize any of those places. And here are the answers. So A is Sidmouth in Devon, B is Iceland, C is the Caspian, D is Chile, E is Scotland, I hope you recognise that one, F is Peru, and G is the Falkland Islands. But the point I'm really trying to make here is that wherever you go in the world where you've got rocky shores, you will find seaweeds. And you'll see seaweeds zoned in relation to the tides. And that's a kind of universal given, if you like, around the world. So I think the big question is really, what are seaweeds? And they are just really a collective group of what we might call macroalgae, but they fall into three categories. So there are the red algae, the green algae, and the brown algae. And the red and the green algae belong in a completely different group to the brown algae. And at the bottom of this diagram here, I've just put in a very simple tree of life, and the reds and the greens belong in the green box there, that's the Archaeoplastida, and along with the land plants. They are ancient. The red algae are over 1.6 billion years old and are the green algae. They've had over 1 billion years to evolve and to occupy many, many different niches on the earth. The brown algae are much more recent. They are in a completely different group, the Straminopiles, and that's a group which any of you who are familiar with the algae will know contain also the diatoms. And these are they came about, I suppose, just after the time of the dinosaurs, but the dinosaurs died out in about 66 million years ago. At that time, the kelps hadn't even appeared. The kelp forests appeared around about 20 million years ago. So we've got these very different groups, but they all live in the marine environment and they have similar characteristics in that way. But the red algae, they're red because they have green pigments, like the green algae, like the land plants, but they also have accessory red pigments. And this helps them to pick up different wavelengths of light when they're in different depths of the water. And the brown algae also have brown pigments in addition to the green pigments. And the brown algal pigments are unique in the biological world. The other really important thing about seaweeds is that they're habitat forming. And so they form kelp forests, you'll be very familiar with those, off the Scottish coast. They also form these wonderful seashores, the wracks, the fucoids, they form these wonderful intertidal habitats. And then we have also at the bottom of this slide here, we have the calcified seaweeds. These have calcium in their skeleton, but very, very important habitats. On the left, these are the crustose ones. On the right are the merle beds. And Jason Hall Spencer will be talking about this on Saturday evening. These calcified crusts are fascinating because they are able to give off messages or cues to the plankton, and that enables the plankton to settle, and then they will grow and develop. And in the marl beds, things like scallops, important fisheries, will find their home there. So these are all extremely important habitats. They're extremely important for the functioning of our marine ecosystems. And you can just see there too, with the brown algae, we've some of the largest organisms on the planet. The bottom picture of the brown algae there is giant kelp, and these can grow to up to 60 meters tall. I'm always fascinated by the sheer wealth of diversity of form and colour that you find in the seaweeds. And you can see here the reds, the greens and browns, all the different colours of the reds, all the different shapes, all the different textures. And these are a wonderful medium, not only for us scientists, but also, I'm sure, for many of you who I think are artists. And they really are very inspiring in their shapes and forms. So I want to just return a little bit back to these habitats. And so here you can see these coralline algal habitats and also the kelp habitats. And I just want to say a little bit more about them. So here we've got a giant kelp forest. This is off South Georgia in the South Atlantic. And in a month's time, I'll be flying out to the Falkland Islands and then traveling by ship to South Georgia, where we'll be doing a seaweed survey. And these are really some of the most fascinating places and very underexplored in terms of the diversity. So in the Falkland Islands, maybe 30% of all the seaweeds that we found in recent years were undescribed. There is no checklist. The same is true for South Georgia. Very, very little seaweed study, and it's a race against time. We need to know what the diversity is before we lose it. Here are some of the calcified seaweed habitats that I found on the Falkland Islands. You can see these very extensive reefs of calcified seaweeds, and the closer you look, the more you can see this wonderful miniature world with many, many different creatures living in it. It's really quite fascinating. The amount of diversity in them, it's as high as in coral reefs, and maybe even higher. And going back to the kelp forest, even Darwin recognized how important they were, and how important they were in relation to things like the rainforests. So kelp forests are some of our most productive habitats on the planet. They support nurseries for fish, they provide us with ecosystem services, they dampen the waves, which protects our coastlines. They provide us with many, many things, and including products such as alginates. And alginates and other products from seaweeds, these are multi-billion-dollar industries around the world. Another area that I'm absolutely fascinated in, and I've wanted to work on this for many, many years, is that of iridescence or structural colour. And just a thought really about that. I've always been inspired by the seaweeds, and I've always been inspired by the structural colour, and I've always wanted to work on it. And I've held that thought in my head, I've held that vision, and I think that's a really important thing. If there's something you really want to do, just hang on to it, just keep it there, just keep working towards it, and one day, hopefully, your wishes will become true with these sorts of things. And now what we have is a big European project, and I'm working with physicists and chemists, and we're looking at the structural colour. What is it? How does it work? Can we make new materials from it? Where does it occur in the world? So many unanswered questions in biology. And here I just wanted to show you some wonderful pictures that I took recently. On the left you can see the blue, what was Cystosara, it's now called Ericaria. It's had about 4 name changes in the last few months. This wonderful turquoise blue colour. In the middle is another species called Chondria caerulescens. And you can see what look like little light bulbs scattered all over it. And these are the reproductive bodies. These are the female reproductive bodies. And when you look at them under high power, they're patches of light, and they're really quite amazing. And on the right, just another view of this, and at the bottom is another common species, Dictyota dichotoma, the netweed, which is also iridescent. And we've been looking at the reflectance spectra. What is the light looking like in terms of the wavelengths that are given off from these seaweeds? And this is some work that was done with a colleague of mine in Cambridge, looking at the colours that these seaweeds give off. And you can see there what the chondria looks like. At the bottom on the left, it's sort of green and blue light. And then another species, Chondria scintillans, which is giving off all sorts of different colours in a very different pattern to the Chondria caerulescens. And something I discovered really very recently is that the green algae do this as well. Members of the Cladophorales, which is things like Chaladophora, which hopefully you will see this weekend if you're on the shore, these also have structural colour in their surface. And these are very different to the red algae in that they have what we call microfibrils that are all lined up and give off like a tartan really colour. And these are the same sorts of structures that give you iridescence in the flowering plants. So this is a really interesting evolutionary story. Why do they do this? Well, we don't know. This is what we're trying to find out. We think it's perhaps a way of getting rid of harmful ultraviolet light, but it may be more complicated than that. And we're doing some very interesting experiments to try to find out. And I just had to show you this. This is something that we've discovered really very recently. On the left is a species Chondria scintillans. Fascinating, and you can see where the arrow is, these little flecks of light, like little torches. It's quite hard to photograph. You can see it with the eye, but you don't always pick it up with the camera. But if you look at the reflectance of that, you get these amazing colours, these amazing structures and these amazing colours. These are really quite tiny. The cells are about 50 microns long. That's tiny. But inside you can probably see little dots. And those are about the size of bacteria. They're about a couple of microns across. And we think these are little bodies that are giving off this light. It's just really something I'm marveling at and trying to understand. But our seaweeds are in trouble, and I'm sure you will have heard about this. They are suffering from climate change. Seawater temperatures are heating up, and these wonderful kelp forests are being affected by it. We're losing kelp forest, we're losing some species of kelp forest in England, down in the southwest. And they are being replaced by other species, but with the kelps that we're losing the big Laminaria hyperborea, or they're declining. And with that, we're losing this wealth of diversity that lives with it. We're also seeing that the Laminaria digitata, although it hasn't decreased as such, its zone appears to be decreasing. We're very, very concerned about this. And of course in Scotland, you're really in the Goldilocks zone for these kelps. Goldilocks, it's really just right, and you have these fantastic kelp forests off your coasts. And so across the world where kelp forests occur, we have figures of about 38% loss or reduction in kelp forests. This is a really frightening figure. At the same time, we're also seeing ocean acidification, and this is affecting these calcified habitats that I've talked about. And it's degrading the structure of the skeleton of these red seaweeds. And that's going to have implications for what these habitats are going to be like and the life that they can support. Things are changing, and things are changing rapidly. We are seeing a loss of the alaria down in the southwest as well. That appears to be declining. It's on the edge of its range there, and therefore vulnerable to increases in temperature change. And the other thing that we are seeing is this increase in non-native species. These have increased even in the last few years, and we're picking up new species fairly regularly. On the whole, they don't really seem to be too much of a problem in Britain. They are in other parts of the world, like the Mediterranean and in Canada, where they can really form these huge rafts of alien species. But here in Britain, perhaps my main concern is with the one on the right. This is Undaria or Wakami, which has spread from jetties and is now quite common on the shore in the south, and probably starting to spread out here too in Scotland. So these things are happening. What can we do? Is there anything we can do? This is really a huge concern. We have to do something. One of the things which makes us perhaps maybe in a better position than some other parts of the world. So I mentioned in the Falklands, we don't have a checklist, but here in Britain, we've had a checklist for over 70 years. We know more or less what we have. We're finding new species all the time. You know, if I tell you that about 12,000 species in the world have been described, and we think probably there are about 24,000 species to find. In Britain, we have 650 species about. It's a hot spot of seaweeds here in the Northeast Atlantic. So we have the checklist. We've been able to record and map the distribution. We've been able to produce seaweed guides. We've also been able to produce the evidence to try to inform policy and to get conservation. We don't have enough yet. We have marine protected areas, which when I started out, we didn't have. The first ones were Skoma and also Strangford Loch and also Lundy Island. But in the 1980s, we had 3. At least now we have more, but we still need more conservation for these species. One of the other things that I've been able to do recently is to do a red list with some of my colleagues. And we've done a red list of the seaweeds of Britain. And we are very concerned about some of the species. But again, we need more evidence. And this is where we need you. So in about 2006, I had an idea for a citizen science project, the Big Seaweed Search. And that has now developed into quite a big project. It's been running now in its current form for nearly 5 years. I've just been analysing the data. I've been able to use data from it to feed into the red list. And again, so this is where we need you. And I think today you'll have the chance to perhaps go out and do a big seaweed search, or you will have heard, or you are going to hear about how to do it. And this is very exciting. It gives you a chance to go out. It gives you a chance to get to know the seaweeds and to really just enjoy them, but also to know that you're doing something that's going to be providing evidence for science. And finally, I just want to say seaweeds are amazing. They're scientifically fascinating. There's such a lot to learn. There's so much diversity to find out about. They're amazing organisms. But crucially, they're critical to the survival of life in our oceans. They are fundamental to our ecosystems, to our shallow subtidal ecosystems. Without them, I really don't know what the world would be like. We will lose so much. It's so imperative that we look after them. It's so imperative that we can manage them and conserve them. And it's only by that are we going to be able to continue to marvel at their diversity and at their beauty. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this absolutely wonderful weekend. And I hope perhaps in the future I'll actually be able to get to meet you all. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your time.